there was a not joke in the Princeton Tiger in 1893 years ago. So there you go, Eagles fans. Like, you're screaming at Nick Sirianni and you're making jokes that are 131 years old. I don't care that you come at me. Just come at me with some A material, even B material. For the love of God, you know what that is? It's a 3-2 joke. It's a third place in the NFC East kind of joke. That's what you guys are. There you go.
It's your own coach yelling at your own fans.
Kind of joke. I mean, that's what it is. That's where you guys are at.
Fantasy Football Happy Hour with Matthew Berry, served by Applebee's.
Welcome to the Fantasy Football Happy Hour. Connor Rogers, Matthew Berry, Lawrence Jackson in the house. Lawrence, how we doing?
I'm good, man. Can't complain. Shout out to my little brother. Well, he ain't little, but he's my younger brother, Bo 404. It was his birthday yesterday, so happy birthday to my brother.
All right.
What's happening?
Did you get him a plus money bet?
Yeah. He always trying to tell my little parlays, but I always tell him, like, if I tell you, then I ruin it. I got to keep it to myself. So, I always lose those bets every time
strategy.
you tell. But, yeah, you
can never lose that way.
Got to have some superstition,
I don't want to derail us too far here. I want to be clear here, Lawrence.
Yeah, be clear.
You're right, okay. When you say to your brother, I can't tell you my bets because that'll ruin the magic. You understand you make a living by telling people your bets.
But
and your fantasy advice.
It's always
that's literally how you put food on the table.
It's always a little parlay, Matthew, that I gotta keep to myself. Like, I had to keep some to myself. We can talk about all the bets on this show.
That's interesting. That's okay. So NBC pays you, but they don't get all of Lawrence, apparently. All right, fair enough. Got it.
It's like,
Why am I the only one, Connor's got his Mets pod and his PFF pod and his Jets pod and his Rangers pods, and he's got whatever, Rangers. And whatever. And Jay's doing his Bet the Edge, and Jay's doing college football, Premier League and golf, and I'm just sitting here holding down the fort. It's fine. Yeah. It's fine. No, everyone else, you guys go ahead. Let me know.
What you mean? I'm like you. I just got NBC.
Yeah, I know.
I do the Fantasy Life radio show, but that's basically the same thing.
It's true. It's fair enough. Fantasy Life and NBC and Fantasy Life have a partnership, so it is in some ways under the same umbrella. Yes.
There's Player X. I'm gonna be hanging out with Drew Brees tomorrow, but that's something
nice.
Okay. That's something different.
Wow. There you go. Ask about Spencer Rattler.
Just throw that in there.
All right, let's get into this thing.
Keep it open, close it out. We got Rotoworld Player news as we've had 2 big wide receiver trades this week. We'll get into all of those. And as always on Wednesdays, we got some early line alert for you. So let's jump in to keep it open or close it out. And we are going to start with Mr. Ride or Die, Kyler Murray. It's been a up and down road for Kyler Murray this season. But if you tune into his YouTube channel, Kyler addresses just tuning out the overall negativity. Take a listen.
Try not to look at too many messages and stuff like that. I try to, see the positive ones and reply to the positive people. Obviously, in this day and age, in this, the sport that we play, there's wins and there's losses. People, they have emotions. They're fans for a reason. Does it bother me? No. I'm not invested in what other people think about what transpired during the game. I know, my main focus is my main focus, and that's winning football games, and that's my teammates and my coaches. But man, I appreciate all the support. Obviously, it's going to be love and hate, but I understand that.
He mentions love and hate. Appreciate you reading, Kyler. Appreciate everyone reading, of course, obviously. Look, I get it. After Amon-Ra St. Brown last year, Jalen Hurts 2 years ago, Austin Eckler 3 years ago, Kareem Hunt's rookie year, Josh Jacobs' rookie year, the ride or die has, hit in a big. I basically have only missed 1 year.
You set the bar too high, which is a classic mistake.
I set the bar too high. I basically missed 1 year. There was 1 year there was an injury that happened in the preseason after I announced it, so you can't count that. But whatever. I did have Daniel Jones 1 year as a ride or die, and that did not work out. But for the most part, I'm like 6 or 7 overall on ride or dies. And this year with Kyler Murray, it's looking a little dicey. I get it. I hear you. And I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's been tough, right? Under 15 fantasy points in 4 of 6 games. Cardinals are 26th in pass rate over expected, and they're 21st in overall pass rate. That's the weird part to me, is that the premise was right. Hey, this is a bad team that's going to be in negative game script quite a bit, and they're going to be throwing a bunch. So the negative game script was correct, Connor, but the throwing a bunch hasn't been. They've been very run-heavy, which is super weird. And so he has not, while he's had some big games, overall, he hasn't been fantasy ride or die successful the way some of the other guys have, right? He's QB 12 on the season. Now, it hasn't been a complete disaster. Again, he's quarterback 12 on a points per game basis so far this year. And I think the other thing that I got wrong here, or I don't know that I've gotten wrong yet because I think still football to play. But the other thing that has surprised me is that they haven't run nearly as much as he's still averaging over 43 rushing yards per game, which is his most since 2020. But he's not getting a lot of rushing volume. It's just been very efficient. It's been these big chunk plays. It's not a big part of their offense when you watch these games. Last week they had a couple of bad fumbles that killed drives as well. There's been some tough matchups, but again, he hasn't been a disaster. He's been fine. He's been a borderline QB1. He went off as QB 8 or 10. He's QB 12 on the season so far. So he certainly hasn't killed you in terms of where you drafted him. He just hasn't been ride or die-esque the way I predicted at the beginning of the season. I am hanging with him though. And specific to this week, Connor, I am keeping it open. He is playing the Chargers, right? And both Justin Fields and Bo Nix scored at least 18 fantasy points against the Chargers. I'm hopeful they get Marvin Harrison back. His slow start and then leaving the game early last week, that contributed as well. And Trey McBride missed a couple games. He hasn't really had a lot of time out there with what we thought was going to be the full complement of pass catchers in McBride and Harrison and Michael Wilson and the human Dortch, Greg Dortch. James Conner hasn't been as great as well. I have to believe they will get this together. The upcoming schedule isn't great, but that's okay, again, because I think they will get him running more. I think that they have to, right? I mean, because it hasn't been working so far. So I have him as QB 10 this week. I'm keeping it open, and I'm leading the light on for him as my ride or die. I'm not bailing. That's what ride or die means. I'm not bailing. Should I have gone with Jaden Daniels? Yes, obviously. But
or Drake London.
Oh, or Drake London. He was on the short list as well. By the way, we have the definitive Drake London interview coming up a little bit later in the show. Heads up, just for that. But yeah, I'm keeping it open this week, and I'm keeping it open for him as my ride or die. I still believe Connor Rodgers. I still believe it's early.
He hasn't been a disaster either.
No,
like you said,
he's
QB 12. He's 1 point away from being QB 8 on the season, and now we're reaching a point of the season here, Lawrence, where it sounds like Justin Fields is going to be benched, which is a little crazy. We'll get more into that later. The options at quarterback will slowly dwindle, and it just has to get better for Kyler if this offense gets healthy.
Mahomes has been bad. Josh Allen was good last week, but he was bad for the 2 weeks before that. I mean, other than Lamar, Anthony Richardson's been awful.
And Jaden Daniels, used by other than Lamar and Jaden Daniels.
Yeah, no, Jaden Daniels has been awesome, but Jaden Daniels been, and he was on the preseason love list, and I mentioned him as he was on he was my runner-up for ride or die. Clearly should have gone that way, but at least as we look at through 6 weeks of the season. But I'm just saying in terms of like if you went with one of the quote-unquote earlier quarterbacks, because Jaden Daniels being drafted,
right.
Basically, Jaden Daniels being he was in the 10 to 14 range. Right. I mean, like he was definitely being drafted outside the top 10. Just whatever. I'm just saying if you went with one of the big, it's not like I wish I didn't draft Kyler Murray because I could have drafted Anthony Richardson or Patrick Mahomes. Like, you have that argument with Lamar Jackson, but Lamar, again, was going 3-4 rounds ahead of Kyler.
Yeah,
so I'm being a little defensive here because, but I am. I'm owning it. I'm owning it. But I'm owning it. Like, I'm not sitting here trying to hide from it.
Look, NBC don't let me get no ride or die, right? But Kyler Murray was a top 5 fantasy quarterback for me as well. And this is why I'll keep it open. Slightly, not as open as you, but like a green tea shot because it ain't that strong, right? Look, you mentioned Bo Nix, what he was able to do. He was quarterback 9 versus this Chargers defense. And the Chargers defense is a well-balanced defense. 8th in pass defense, 6th in rush defense. And 2, when you look at the Chargers defense, they missing some guys. A couple of DBs and Asante Samuel Jr., Jasir Taylor, and they're missing Joey Bosa. So anything like if you just combine that with what Kyler Murray can do, we saw him a couple weeks ago against the Niners, point in the air, 10 yards past the line of scrimmage, take it for 50 yards to the house. Like, we know he can still do that. So, and like you said, still a starting quarterback in fantasy. So we're not closing it out just for, a few, bad games.
I also like the fact that, by the way, that Kyler Murray's YouTube show, he's in a car, he's jogging, he's in the gym,
he's riding the bike.
It doesn't matter. It's just like whatever. Oh, hi, how are you? It's one of those.
Feel very, I didn't see you there.
Oh, I didn't see you there. But while you're here, might as well.
Here's what's happening.
I might as well tell you I don't care what you think about my playing. That's
right. Anyway.
While we're at it.
Shout out QB1. All right,
I'll have
come
you
on.
here for a
K1,
second.
come on, let's
Take
go.
a listen. Our next player here, Lawrence Achane. He's got the Colts. He's coming off a bye week. Hopefully he was able to get healthy during that bye week. But the bottom line is he hasn't scored double-digit fantasy points since week 2. When this team doesn't have a quarterback, it makes it brutal on the running game.
Yeah, it's been tough, right? But what you saw in that Dolphins offense from the first game that Tyler Huntley started to the second was that they did get a little better. And what they did do is they got that running game going. You saw Raheem Mostert and Jalen Wright both go for over 80 rushing yards. And this Colts rushing defense, you look at what Pollard just did against them, 17 carries, 93 and a touchdown. Week before that, Tank Bigsby, 100 yards and a touchdown. So if he plays this weekend, I like them to lean on him a little bit and continue. They'll get the receivers the ball in the short area, but I'd expect them to lean on the run game. I'm keeping it open.
What about you, Matthew?
I'm also keeping it open. I mean, look, I agree with you. Lawrence. Look, it feels like there's at least some positivity heading into the bye where they rushed for 187 yards in their last game. Devon Achane in his 4 full games this season has an over 17% target share. It's a nice matchup against the Colts as Indianapolis allows the 5th most rushing yards to opposing running backs. And I hope to think that off of the bye, Tyler Huntley's now been, in essence, the starting quarterback for almost a month. And so you hope that he's got a better grasp of the offense and that Mike McDaniel took these 2 weeks to be like, all right, let's figure out what we've got. We know it's a few more weeks before Tua can, in theory, come back. So I believe we will see a more efficient, a better version, not what we expected, but a more competent version of the Dolphins offense coming out of the bye. And it does feel like prior to the bye, again, because they were successful running the ball, that they figured something out with that run game. Hopefully, we expect Devon Achane to be cleared. I don't think he's officially been cleared.
We're going to wait for our practice. It is Wednesday for us. We got to wait for official reports throughout the week.
But it feels like he'll be.
Hopefully,
we're hoping.
With Malik Neighbors, that it would be a 1 week concussion. These concussions have been different this year. They've been longer timelines.
It's all different.
As my friend and longtime colleague Stefan Yabel always talks about, concussions are nonlinear injuries, and they go, sometimes that you're good and then you're bad, and they're nonlinear injuries. So you never know. Malik Neighbors is a great example. Hopefully Achane gets back, but even if he's not, I would keep it open for Mostert or Jalen Wright. As the week goes on, we'll get a better sense of who's going to be running for Miami. But whoever the Dolphins running back is, I'm in on this week against the Colts with 2 weeks to prepare for this game.
Another running back further on the list here, Matthew, Zack Moss, 19 total touches over the past 2 weeks. Chase Brown getting more involved in this offense for Cincinnati.
I'm closing it out. He's had 19 touches total in the past 2 games. He fumbled in the third quarter last week, and then we just didn't see him again. Chase Brown's been the more explosive guy. I'm closing it out on the road at Cleveland.
I'm going to close it out as well. Chase Brown has out-carried him for 2 straight weeks now. And then, look, you're going against the Browns. They shut down Saquon Barkley last week. If that so happens to happen again versus the Bengals, which running back is more likely to have a breakaway run? That's Chase Brown, not Zack Moss. I'm closing it out.
We jump to the pass catchers. Brandon Aiyuk, he's got a tough matchup against the Chiefs. Lawrence, he's only got 1 game with 10-plus fantasy points this season. We know that the holdout would lead to a slow start. That didn't surprise us, but he hasn't gotten going yet. It's almost Halloween.
Yeah, it's tough, but in this type of game here, you got to leave Brandon Aiyuk in. The over-under's 47 here. Since week 2, Kansas City Chiefs have allowed a touchdown reception to a receiver in every single game. Now, they do allow the 6th fewest fantasy points to wide receivers, but again, Brandon Aiyuk is a top-tier receiver along there with Debo, and with these 49er players, it could be any one of their day at any time. Like last week, it was Debo and Kittle. This week, it could be Aiyuk, so I'm keeping it open on him.
I'm keeping it open as well. First off, it's sort of the talent, right? He's had 5 end zone targets. He hasn't converted any of them. I feel like positive touchdown regression is coming for Brandon Aiyuk. He's had at least 3 deep targets in each of the past 3 games as well. I get it with a matchup against Kansas City. Chiefs allow the 8th fewest fantasy points to wide receivers. And Aiyuk has been bad. Let's be clear. He's been single-digit fantasy points in 5 of his 6 games so far this year. But they paid him for a reason. He's off the mini-bye. They were the Thursday night game last week, so they've had 10 days to prep for a huge game against the Chiefs as well. There's a reason why the Niners paid Brandon Aiyuk. He's a big part of what they need to do offensively. So we saw Kittle go off in the last game. That's one of the challenges with the Niners because they have so many weapons. Yeah. But Aiyuk is due. We saw what his potential was 2 games ago.
Yeah,
We've seen it in the previous years. I get it. I understand it. I'm at wide receiver 24, so he's more of a high-end wide receiver 3, very low-end wide receiver 2, but I'm keeping it open on Brandon Aiyuk this week.
Michael Pittman Jr. also on our keep it open or close it out list. He's got the Dolphins. He scored in consecutive weeks, but the receiving yards aren't there, Matthew, for Michael Pittman.
No.
And we know he's playing with a pretty significant back injury right now. Josh Downs has gotten the volume in this pass game.
He's been the better wide receiver. He's played 3 full games, Michael Pittman has, with Anthony Richardson, weeks 1 through 3. He averaged 6.6 fantasy points per game, right? He's had 1 game this year with more than 40 yards, so you're like, all right, well, maybe he'll get a touchdown, right? But he doesn't score touchdowns. I get it. He scored 1 last week, whatever. But he's generally not, through his career, he's never been a big touchdown guy. Michael Pittman's made his fantasy bones, if you will, on having insane volume and just being like this PPR cheat code, and it's just not happening with Anthony Richardson under center. 57% of Michael Pittman's fantasy points this year have come with Joe Flacco, comeback player of the year. Joe Flacco under center, not Anthony Richardson. Richardson's going to get the start. Pittman's my wide receiver 36 this week, as you see there on your screen. I'm closing it out.
Shout out to Michael Pittman for catching that touchdown pass against the Titans, because it was a prayer there. I'm going to close it out too on Michael Pittman. But this to me, it has everything to do with how the Miami defense is, right? They allowed a 3rd fewest fantasy points to receivers. Versus Miami defense, you want to run that ball. They allow the 2nd most fantasy points per game to running backs. So if Jonathan Taylor is able to come back, it should be a very big day for him. Him and Anthony Richardson to get going in that running game. So for me, with the Dolphins only allowing 2 receptions for touchdowns this season, you know, I expect Josh Downs to, you know, do his little 8 for 70 yards little thing. But it's going to be hard for a receiver to score against the Dolphins defense. But you can run against them, and I think that's the approach that the Colts will have.
Jordan Addison also on our list here, Lawrence. He's got a tough matchup against a stingy Lions defense, although we'll be without Aiden Hutchinson now. Problem with Addison is he's got 3 or fewer receptions in every game this season. We know Justin Jefferson gets his looks. T.J. Hawkinson will be back in this offense. The volume hasn't been there in the 2nd year for Addison.
Yeah, I don't know if he'll ever get like that type of volume, to be honest. It like when he plays this year, though, it is 19% of the targets. So you still got Detroit, who allows the 6th most fantasy points to receivers. And then the over-under is 50 here. So, look, I'm leaving it open, but you're hoping for a touchdown. That, like, when he's had good fantasy days, it's like he's the other. It's like they'll have Jamison Williams on the other side.
Yeah.
He's like that.
100%.
And so if you expect a shootout, then I would keep it open, because the Vikings offense is rolling. Aaron Jones is a little banged up. Maybe they pass the ball a little more. So I'll leave it open. I'm not banging the table for it, but I'm going to leave it open this week in this type of game.
I'm going to close it out. You mentioned it, right? He is touchdown dependent. And I get, Lawrence, your argument is like, well, I think he's got a shot at scoring a touchdown. He certainly does. It's worth noting that the Lions have allowed only 3 touchdowns to opposing wide receivers this entire year. That's tied for the 4th fewest in the NFL. 3 or fewer receptions in every game this year, as you mentioned here. In the 20 career games that he's played with Justin Jefferson active, as he will be on Sunday, he's got an under 16% target share. So for me, Jordan Addison is a little bit too touchdown dependent here. I'm going to close it out on him. He's my wide receiver 41. He's just outside my top 40. You're seeing some Jalen Naylor as well, and we don't know if Hawkinson will be back this week or not. But it's if not, maybe Munt. Maybe, whatever. Yeah. No, they use
Big
him
Munt.
a little bit. Yeah, Big Munt.
They throw to their running backs.
They do, yeah. So I'm closing it out on Jordan Addison.
In the same game on the other sideline, Sam LaPorta right now, Matthew, a guy that had a marvelous rookie season last year. He's just not getting the looks this year. No. He's averaging 3 targets a game.
He really is not getting the looks. He has been a disappointment. He was more or less the consensus #1 tight end in fantasy, and much like many players at the tight end position, just hasn't produced the way we would have hoped, and certainly hasn't returned his draft capital in fantasy. All that said, I'm keeping it open. You know why?
What can you do?
Because it's tight end. What else are you going to do? I mean, I'm tight end 12 this week as well. If you're looking for something positive here, Vikings have allowed the 7th most fantasy points to opposing tight ends, including the 8th most receptions. Both George Kittle and Tucker Kraft finished as tight end 1 when they faced the Vikings as well. I get it. Just a 10% target share for LaPorta so far this year. Hasn't seen an end zone target since week 1. They're running the ball when they get in close. Jameson Williams has emerged. Even Amon-Ra St. Brown, his numbers have gone down. But you mentioned the shootout potential of this game. And if you're basically saying, like, you know what, Sam LaPorta has more or less become a touchdown-dependent tight end like most of them, all right, well then give me a super talented guy on a high-scoring offense with a good quarterback. Like, if you're saying, like, I've got to roll out a touchdown-dependent tight end, then Sam LaPorta is as good a touchdown-dependent tight end as there is, just because we know from a physical standpoint he's super talented, and we like this offense quite a bit. So I'm reluctantly keeping him open. Again, I'm at tight end 12, a borderline tight end 1 this week.
What's interesting is the Lions' leading receiver in yards is Jameson Williams right now because he catches like
those long passes.
The funny thing about LaPorta, he had an over-under of 40 receiving yards in week 6. So I took the under, and then he goes out and has 1 target, 1 catch for 52 yards and touchdown. But I'm going to keep it open as well, Matthew. Week 5, Tyler Conklin caught 6 of 9 targets for 55 yards against them. Week 6, Tucker Kraft caught 6 of 9 targets for 53 yards against the Vikings. So I'm gonna keep it open for Sam LaPorta. I just don't think if you got Sam LaPorta, you probably ain't in the position to even be thinking about this right now. Plus, again, the over/under for this game is 50. So chase that.
By the way, do you know why that happened when you took the under on LaPorta's receiving yards and then he got the 1 pass for 52?
On a trick play.
On the trick play. Do you know why that happened? Because you didn't tell your brother about it. That's karma. That's what it is.
Yeah.
The fantasy gods,
thought about that.
The gambling gods looked down and said, you know what?
Selfish.
Lawrence is being selfish. He's not helping out his own kin, his flesh and blood. We're going to teach him. We're going to teach him a lesson.
I'm not going to disagree with that.
They taught you a lesson. There you go.
They've been teaching me a lesson the past couple weeks, too.
Yeah, it's been tough.
It's humbling.
Humbling.
Humbling business.
Yeah, honestly, you've been doing your brother a favor by keeping those parlays to
exactly.
yourself. To be honest with you, you've been a little cold lately. I get it.
Or you could tell him the bets, and he could fade you.
Yeah, that's the other way to go.
So maybe that's
we back this week, baby. We back. I'm telling you all along.
We'll never stop. To recap, Matthew's keep it open or close it out rankings, and then Lawrence will go through yours. Kyler Murray is obviously ride or die. He stays open at QB10. Devon Achane stays open against the Colts. Great matchup, top 20 play. Zach Moss against the Browns, that's a close. He's lost his volume. Browns are tough front. RB31 for Zach Moss. Brandon Aiyuk against the Chiefs. You got to keep it open with the talent he has. A top 25 play at wide receiver is Aiyuk. Michael Pittman Jr., once again, another guy that's just not getting enough looks. He's got a tough Dolphins secondary, wide receiver 36. That's a close. Jordan Addison is a close at wide receiver 41 against a Lions secondary that, yes, they've given up the yards, but they've not given up the touchdowns. Sam LaPorta, what are you going to do at tight end? He's tight end 12. Keep it open against the Vikings. Lawrence, only one different for you. I believe it was Jordan Addison.
Yes, sir.
Jordan Addison is an open for Lawrence, but as we emphasize, very, very touchdown dependent. Let's jump into the Rotoworld Player news. For all of your Rotoworld Player news, go to NBCSports.com. And guys, we had a pretty wild Tuesday here with multiple wide receiver trades coming in. We went over Devontae Adams on the waiver wire show, but how about the Bills in the same division making a move, trading for Amari Cooper? The Bills send a 2025 third rounder and 2026 seventh rounder. In return, the Browns send Amari Cooper and a 2025 sixth round pick. So Matthew, this feels like great news if you've been rostering Amari Cooper. You go from Deshaun Watson, maybe the worst quarterback in the league, to Josh Allen, a top 3 quarterback in the league.
By the way, and not a ton of target competition. I get that the Bills have a lot of guys, but I think it's the lack of production from all those guys that made the Bills say, like, if we're going to make a run here, we need some production from the receiver room. We let Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis go in the offseason. We thought we replaced them with Keon Coleman and Curtis Samuel and an elevated role for Khalil Shakir, and that just hasn't panned out the way we hoped. So let's go get a proven veteran, a guy like Amari Cooper, who's played in a bunch of different offenses. We've seen this before where Amari Cooper gets traded mid-season and immediately starts producing. So Josh Allen, who led all quarterbacks in deep pass attempts last season, suddenly gets a true #1 wide receiver. Since the start of last year, only Tyreek Hill has more deep targets in the NFL than Amari Cooper. He's got a 27% target share this year, Amari does, but only 60% of his targets have been catchable. But now he gets Josh Allen, proud Fantasy Life investor, Josh Allen. You see the screen right there in terms of who the receiving leaders, and I'm using that word in quotes, of the Buffalo Bills are. I mean, Keon Coleman with, 12 for 201 and 2 touchdowns. Shakir, like it's just been sort of like this, wide receiver by committee. Mac Hollins has gotten some work out there as well. Feels like Mac Hollins and Keon Coleman are the ones that are sort of, quote, the bigger losers in terms of snaps. You'll still see, Shakir and Samuel in the slot. But listen, Amari gets out of Cleveland. Devontae gets out of Vegas. So yes, disgruntled wide receivers. It is your day. Congratulations.
You're free. It seems like you're all happy.
But you know what? Listen.
Well, Devontae Adams was definitely disgruntled.
Oh, very disgruntled.
He was over it.
I don't think
he was already over at Adams' house.
He was over it.
They were setting that up like, hey man, we about to pull the trade off. Come from the back and then show up on the screen.
Oh yeah, it was well done by them. That was well played. But back to Amari Cooper here for a second. Amari Cooper, who was borderline unstartable, he had the one big game, but really because Deshaun Watson and that Browns offense has been so dysfunctional so far for much of the year that you're just sort of like, we've done keep it open, close it out with Amari Cooper. Right. You're just sort of like, I'm closing it out. But now goes to Josh Allen. I think Amari Cooper is now on the borderline wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3, radar there. I think somewhere in the 18 to 22 range is where you feel like Cooper is in a neutral matchup.
Big upgrade.
A big, massive upgrade for Amari Cooper. Also, by the way, I think there's just something mentally about going from a team that's 1-5 and there's, they know the Browns aren't going anywhere to now like, you got a shot at a Super Bowl this year. You've got a shot at a Super Bowl. You've got a shot. You definitely got a real shot at the playoffs, at a home playoff game, and potentially the Super Bowl if you're Amari Cooper. Josh Allen helps Josh Allen. It's like he was already a top 5 fantasy quarterback, already, one of the elites, but this certainly helps maybe the inconsistency. As I mentioned, last week was really good, but the 2 weeks prior he'd been bad. Cost me a .14 loss to Jay Croucher and his grape slappers because Josh Allen had single-digit fantasy points.
It'll give him what he had lost in those first 3 years with Stephon Diggs. Is good for both parties. The things with Amari Cooper when he was in Cleveland was like, hey, he's still getting 8 targets a game, but now if he could get those same 8 targets here in Buffalo, he'll be set up nice. Just got to worry about him in the cold a little bit, but that's for another day. When it gets cold, it's not that cold yet.
Yeah, in Buffalo, it gets cold in 2 weeks.
It gets cold as hell in Buffalo. It's probably cold now.
It is.
Which is very true, but it also gets cold in Cleveland, not Buffalo cold, because nothing gets Buffalo cold. And Cooper has not traditionally played well in the cold weather. But either way, my point is if I'd gone to you, Lawrence, and said, hey, you're an Amari Cooper manager, I got a choice for you. I can either trade him to a cold weather team like Buffalo, or you can stay in Cleveland.
In another cold weather,
You'd been like, get him to Buffalo, right? I think this is a good move for Josh Allen, for Amari Cooper, for fantasy managers of either one of those guys. I think the 2 other things I'll say here on this trade is, number one, is the remaining Bills pass catchers are all now like not usable. They already were.
Shakir's a flex.
Shakir maybe like
I would say Shakir.
PPR flex.
PPR flex maybe he didn't. Samuel played more snaps, was the better player, but he's not healthy.
That's not good.
So once Khalil Shakir is fully healthy, maybe, but also, by the way, Curtis Samuel I thought looked pretty good against the Jets, and he was somebody that was banged up at the beginning of the year. So I don't know. I think it's hard to sit here and say like when both guys are fully healthy, Samuel or Shakir is definitely going to be the slot guy you want.
Right.
I think they'll mix and match with both those guys. You've also got Kincaid as well. So I just feel like this is going to be sort of other than Amari Cooper, you just sort of like. So Matt Collins will catch a touchdown 1 week, and then Keon Coleman, and then Samuel. Like it's just going to be kind of like this, blah. You're going to still start Dalton Kincaid because he's a tight end,
right?
Yeah. And the running backs, but it sort of simplifies for me at least. I'm just like, if you were trying to count on any of these ancillary Bills pass catchers beyond Kincaid, now you can just be sort of like, no thanks. I dropped Shakir in a couple of leagues last night to pick up to make waiver claims because I thought, well, Mari's coming there. And then the last thing I'll say is that on the Cleveland Browns side, it's hard to trust anyone because the passing game has been so dysfunctional with Deshaun Watson. I'm hoping that at some point they turn to Jameis Winston. Feels like they're realizing it ain't their year and maybe they're blowing it up by getting Amari out of there. Of course, there's an argument to keep Roland Watson out there so you get a low draft pick, But I will say that, never been the biggest Jerry Jeudy fan, but certainly an increased target share for him. I think the biggest winner here is David Njoku, who to me is the most proven pass catcher on the Browns. The schedule gets a little bit easier for Cleveland. But Connor, I know you and I have talked about this guy, especially from a dynasty perspective. I picked up Cedric Tillman in a couple of deep leagues. I've always liked Cedric Tillman. And
I loved him in that draft class. So big body perimeter receiver. Somebody has to play on the outside in this offense. I know he had a rocky rookie season over there. He didn't really earn his way into more targets or opportunity. But I still believe in the talent with Cedric Tillman. And somebody has to play. This is going to be a big opportunity for him. And Elijah Moore has never taken the reins there, so I'm not expecting anything from him.
Yeah, it feels like Cedric Tillman has the most upside. Whether that turns into anything this year or not, but like in deeper leagues, maybe worth a flyer.
Yeah, I don't have much to say about the Browns offense, so we could move on.
We'll move on to stay in the division with the Steelers offense.
You said it. We good. Yeah.
But when we talk about the fact that the Steelers are crazy, can we talk about this, Lawrence? The Steelers are crazy.
So
they're what are they? 4-2, 5-1.
4-2.
4-2. They're 4-2.
Very scrappy 4-2.
Yeah, like
they're 4-2. They're in first place. Like,
if you missed it, Russell Wilson is
in
in consideration to start versus the Jets this Sunday. I say in consideration. I don't think there's a human left in the world that doesn't think Russell Wilson is starting. Before we have the convo, fellas, let's just listen to Mike Tomlin and we'll react to his thought process, because I did think what he had to say was at least interesting.
There's also a totality of his resume as well that makes you more comfortable than guys with shorter resumes in that regard, in terms of his ability to play ball on a limited amount of exposure. I have that mentality about guys across positions, and we've had that discussion before. Veteran players, there's just comfort that comes with experience in some of those, really sometimes uncomfortable discussions. I'll acknowledge that Russ proved his health last week, man, and we're looking hard at it this week. It is up for consideration.
I think the reality is the Steelers want to win games 12-6.
Yeah, look, they want to win games. So if you want to do that, that's what you've been doing. Now, I would say this: I don't think it would have been even a consideration had the Steelers found a way to mess it up against the Raiders. But Justin Fields started off shaky in that game. They got it together and won the game by 20 points. So, but from the way their offense is run, we've seen Arthur Smith as a coordinator here in Pittsburgh. We've seen him in Atlanta. We've seen him in Tennessee. It's all the same thing. So when Russell Wilson gets in there, what's the difference going to be? The quarterback can't escape and run away when things break down. So, I mean, you'll get more from a fantasy perspective. If it is Russ, you'll get more targets to the running backs. Right? What you won't have is a startable quarterback in fantasy, at least not with top 12 upside like Justin Fields.
He's not going to have the upside of Justin Fields. I think he's potentially usable very quietly last year. Russell Wilson was quarterback 11 in points per game. He averaged over 17 fantasy points per game. There are some weapons there. Now, and Russell Wilson, again, at least 15 fantasy points in 11 of his last 15 starts. But to your point about no upside, he has only 3 games during that stretch with over 20 fantasy points. Tough matchup against the Jets, a desperate Jets team that really needs to win this game. Jets allow the 3rd fewest fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. So I'm not starting Russell Wilson this week, even if the Steelers are. It's more of an NFL discussion than a fantasy one. The only thing I was just say is what's weird to me is like I came out of that Cowboys-Steelers game because I was there in Pittsburgh, and as were you. And we just had a conversation, Lawrence, where we're just like, if Justin Fields made some basic 3rd down throws, they win that game. He was awful. He was basically the reason they lost that game. One of the big
Pittsburgh run defense.
And the Pittsburgh run defense. They somehow couldn't stop Rico Dowdle on the last drive.
But I would say it was his worst effort of the season from like a pure quarterbacking standpoint. Yeah.
And so I went out that week and said, like, I feel like they're going to turn to Russell Wilson here. Just, stuff that I'm hearing and everything like that. And just, again, like, Mike Tomlin's not an idiot. Like, he's got a team that can win, and they just need a quarterback that can literally be competent. And Justin Fields just couldn't make basic throws. He can do some electric plays, but he couldn't do, like, basic QB stuff. And then they went out and used him. Then they started him again against the Raiders. And by the way, Fields played a lot better. They won big. And so I'm like, I guess they're – but now, after that, now they're going to Russell Wilson. The one thing I will say is that this is something that I was talking with Coach Dungy, and I don't think he'll mind me sharing this, but Coach Dungy, who obviously works for Football Night in America, and he went to Steelers practice prior to the Dallas game to, obviously to do his prep for his broadcast on Football Night in America. And he said, I went there on Thursday, and Russell Wilson was playing the role of Dak Prescott, against the first team Steelers defense to get the Steelers defense ready for the Cowboys game. And he just said to me, he's like, Russell was lighting him up. He's like, Russ looked great and was just lighting him up in practice. So again, it's one day and it was a week and a half ago, but if that's what Mike Tomlin is seeing in practice, that Russ is just lighting him up, just lighting up this elite defense, the Steelers defense, then it sort of makes sense. It's just a weird one to me off of a win where he played. Like, it's weird that you wouldn't make the change after the Cowboys game, but you would make the change heading into the Jets game after a win.
Well, that's my counter. I think this is the wrong week to do it. You want a running quarterback against the Jets front. Josh Allen, his effectiveness against the Jets was running around and creating plays or using his legs to pick up yards. It's not like he dropped back and just picked them apart. The Bills ran the ball down the Jets' throats in that game. Did. And part of the threat of the Bills' running game is that Josh Allen can also run. Same with the Steelers. If the Steelers have a quarterback that doesn't run anymore in Russell Wilson, and they're just turning around and handing the ball to Najee Harris and Jalen Warren, yes, you can run on the Jets, but it's more predictable. It's more simplified.
I don't think it is as effective. Like those holes that you saw the Bills creating, that was like saying, like, oh, we got to watch out for the quarterback too.
Tomlin was also asked, I think, in that press conference, if there was a chance to see both guys on Sunday, and he said yes.
Yeah,
there's
that's
a
worked
chance.
In the past for teams.
I know, it's awful. But
I think that's worse than
I agree.
I agree with you. But
do you think they start Russell this Sunday?
I do.
You do?
I do as well. But either way, what I will tell you is for fantasy purposes, for the purposes of what we're talking about here, is I don't want either guy. I guess if Fields gets the start, I feel like, to your point, like it'd be good against the Jets, but
it'd be effective.
But there's a chance that he gets pulled for Russell Wilson.
That's a good point.
Just be aware that if he struggles against, Sauce Gardner and hopefully DJ Reed's back, that they might pull him. He's going to have a short leash. So it's a really dicey situation in Pittsburgh for the quarterback situation.
One quick note, the Vikings once again have traded for Cam Akers. He is back with Minnesota. They're thin in the backfield. We'll keep an eye on Aaron Jones' injury. They just can't stop trading for Cam Akers.
Yeah, find yourself somebody who looks at you the way the Vikings look at Cam Akers. The only thing that's weird here is like you think like, oh, Aaron Jones must be more hurt than that we thought initially. But then Tom Pelissero of NFL Network, who was one of the people that reported the trade, said this has nothing to do. Here's the tweet for those of you listening. Tom Pelissero tweets, quote, "The Vikings trade for Cam Akers isn't a reflection of any long-term concerns with running back Aaron Jones, who could play Sunday. Just another quality running back who knows the system, going back to his days with Kevin O'Connell in L.A. And obviously Cam Akers had a cup of coffee with the Vikings as well. So, yeah, maybe. But that may also be him, like, carrying the water for a coach or a general manager. It's just weird, though. I get the Vikings wanting running back depth. Hey, they're a playoff team. They only have Ty Chandler really behind Aaron Jones. But on the other hand, like, the Texans are a playoff team. And, like, you just lost Mixon. And, like, Dameon Pierce has been brutal this entire year. So, like, you're trading Akers, you're going to go in with Pierce and Dario Gumbawale?
I think we find out the real answer when whether Aaron Jones plays or not Sunday. Then we'll know why they really got Cam Akers.
Some injuries we're tracking besides Aaron Jones. Anthony Richardson with the oblique. It's looking like he's going to start. We'll keep an eye on Jonathan Taylor with that ankle as we get our practice reports today. James Cook expected to work his way back, but toe injuries for running backs can be tricky. Travis Etienne.
That feels week to week.
Toe injuries with running backs. You really
I'm saying
don't
with
know.
Etienne with a hammy feels week to week.
Same with hamstrings for running backs as well. Nick Chubb is working his way back as they open up that window. Cooper Kupp, we'll get more on him. It sounded like he could play this week, then it trended the wrong way.
Yeah, who knows?
We're still waiting on Cooper Kupp. Marvin Harrison Jr., he's in concussion protocol, but maybe with a little extra time, he'll be able to play this week, while Chris Olave is not going to play Thursday night. There's just no way he can get out of concussion protocol in time. Rashid Shaheed did not practice to start this week either with the knee. So the Saints, as we said, fire up Bub Means if you have to.
Bub Means.
Bub.
What a great name.
Pittsburgh.
Big Bub. This Sunday night, it's a showdown of two teams vying for position in a crowded group of the AFC contenders. Catch Aaron Rodgers and the new-look Jets take on T.J. Watt and the Steelers in Pittsburgh. Coverage starts at 7 p.m. Eastern, only on NBC.
NBC promo people are like, should we put Russ there?
I'm about to say, what's up, man? Why they take my boy Fields off?
Throw T.J. Watt in there. He's safe.
You can't lose with that. You can't lose with T.J. Watt.
We're not going to get memed if we have the wrong quarterback
I
here.
thought the Giants was the only one doing this type of stuff.
It's good marketing right
Give me a defensive guy.
We're taking our first break. When we're back, We got Brock Bowers, potentially the tight end 1 now that Devontae Adams is in New York. Plus Matthews sit down with Detective Drake London.
The definitive
You won't
Drake
wanna miss
London
this
interview.
one. Coming right up.
Snap to Cousins. He wants to throw. Quick shot. London. Touchdown Atlanta. He pivoted against J.C. Horn and boxed him out and caught the rock for the score.
How strong are Drake London's hands?
The breakout year for Drake London continues as Kirk Cousins gets hot. Drake London is really, really taking off, Matthew, and you got to talk to Detective Drake this week.
I did indeed. Great time to talk with Drake London. And one of the things that I asked Detective Drake London was about his usage this year, because it feels like they're using him a lot more in the slot. And Drake answered that question and a few more. Take a listen.
Being in the slot, being able to move around on the field has helped me a lot. And that dates back to my USC days when I was a freshman. That's how I even got onto the field, was playing slot. And I think that with my basketball background, there's a lot of spatial awareness and a lot of feel that goes with that. And I think that it fits my game really, really well.
Curious, Kirk Cousins says, we heard this from some of the other guys as well, but Kirk Cousins says he texts you with voice memos. Is this true? What is that like?
Yeah, I'll be home after practice or something if we watch film and he sees something else, he'll send me a voice memo. But honestly, it's really, really useful. You can hear his tone of voice, hear what he's saying, and understand if you watch the film back yourself and just listen to his voice memo, what he's trying to get at and what point he's trying to drive.
Okay, so then he texts you a voice memo. Do you voice memo him back, or do you send an emoji? Like, how do you communicate back to him?
Yeah, I'll usually text back, but sometimes I have sent a voice memo back to him, and so I'm guilty of that. But yeah.
We really appreciate you being here, Drake. I know you're here thanks to DirecTV for Business. Tell me about your relationship with them and why you're joining us today.
Yeah, they partnered with my old alma mater, USC, and they just truly make it easy for me to watch my guys in the Trojans go to work. And if you guys have any more questions or information that you want to gather, go to directtv.com/forbusiness, and they'll help you out there.
I appreciate that. Thank you. We'll absolutely have everyone to check that out. Congratulations to you on so much success so far. It's been fun watching the Falcons. I'm trying to get, we have a big Falcons fan on the show, and so I've been trying to get Bird Up as a thing. I know Rise Up is the thing, but I feel like it's an alternative. Any thoughts on Bird Up as a statement here?
I kind of like it. I can see it going somewhere. So maybe after the next win, I'll say Bird Up and we'll get it going.
There, now we're talking. Now I've got someone on my side. Because it's so dumb. It's so dumb. I feel like it could actually work. Like my friend that's a Falcons fan, he's from Atlanta. He's like, come on, it's Rise Up. I'm like, no, Bird Up. Let's go Falcons. Anyway, yeah, if you say Bird Up, if like in a post-game press conference, like sometimes like Russell Wilson be like, let's ride or whatever at the end of a press conference, you just sort of like very quietly like answer all your questions and then you're like, Bird Up. Like I think we got a better shot of it catching on than if I do it.
Most definitely, and if I do it, all credit to you. You know where it came from first.
Drake, you are my guy. You're awesome, man. Really appreciate you. Good luck to you and the Falcons the rest of the season. Thanks so much for joining us.
Appreciate you, Matt. Thank you.
There you go. Bird Up's going to be a thing.
I need this like oxygen.
Oh, it'll be great.
Yes.
And speaking of that too, again, my brother, he's saying Bird Up right now.
Okay, there
I got the whole chat talking about some Bird Up, so
okay.
it's going with some Atlanta people.
All right, there you go.
But we gotta get Drake London to get on to it.
Come on, Drake. If Drake does it, we got a shot. We got a real shot if Drake does it. Bird Up.
Bird Up.
Bird Up.
I need it so badly. Thank you, everybody.
Amazing.
Bird Up.
Bird Up.
Walks off the presser.
It's like he goes, go Atlanta, Bird Up, and just walks off the presser. Any other questions? All right, thank you. Go Atlanta, Bird Up, and he just walks out.
The local Atlanta media would be like, Tweet it out, see if it catches on.
Ah, come on.
Be great for the show.
Please, Drake London, I'm begging you.
And you know we going to have shirts, too.
Yep.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
All right, who's eating good? Served by Applebee's, as it always is. We start with Evan Engram. He's got the Patriots. And Matthew, in this barren wasteland that is tight end, is Evan Engram a top 5 option right away since he's returned?
He is. He's my tight end 5 this week. Last week, 29% target share. It's tied for the most targets among tight ends last week. At least 4 receptions now for Evan Engram in 18 of his past 19 games dating back to last season. Trevor Lawrence, there's not a lot that's working in Jacksonville right now, but Trevor Lawrence to Evan Engram is one of the things that actually is. He's had at least 6 targets in 89% of his games since the start of last season. So in a game that should be competitive against the Patriots over in London, Evan Engram is a top 5 tight end for me this week.
For a guy to come in week 1, get hurt, play half the game, miss 4 games, then come back and immediately have 10 catches, over 100 yards, that's saying top 5 fantasy tight end to me. Then when you look going forward past the Patriots, he's got Green Bay. They're the 5th worst against tight ends in fantasy. Philadelphia is a little bit better, but then you get Minnesota, who's the 6th worst against tight ends in fantasy. So not only you're going to start him regardless, but it's just knowing that you got some good matchups to go with it makes it even better.
Lawrence, things have been great for Brock Bowers during his rookie season. Are they about to get better with Davante Adams out the door?
Yeah, they're going to get better. And to be honest, the first 3 weeks of the season with Davante Adams, he was the best tight end in fantasy besides Dallas Goedert because of that one big game Dallas Goedert had. But Brock Bowers was already good. Now that Davante Adams is gone, he's got 2 straight games with at least 8 catches, double-digit targets. They're just going to say, look, this is why we took him 13th overall when we had many more needs on both sides of the ball. This is why we're going to use him. You saw him last week, 9 catches for 71 yards. So, yeah, look at him. They're manufacturing them targets, finding ways to get him the ball every way possible. He's a top 3. I had him at tight end 8 coming into the year. Now it's too low, obviously. So, top 3 tight end rest of the way.
I think everyone was too low on Brock Bowers. That's my biggest miss of the season so far. I was worried about usage. I was worried about the quarterback. All of that was wrong. And by the way, with Davante Adams, we talked about this yesterday when we talked about the trade, but with Davante Adams now in New York, he is the offense here. He's the only tight end this season with 4 different games of 6 or more receptions. That's only going to go up. 17.5 points per game in his 4 games with at least a 20% target share. He's going to get at least a 20% target share with no Davante Adams. Oh, get this. His next 2 opponents, the Rams and then the Chiefs, are the 2 worst teams against tight ends so far this season. He's my tight end 3 this week. And I would argue, guys, that if you had a draft today for the rest of the season, like, for example, you were doing a guillotine league, which you can start at any point you want during the season. You could join it now today and draft for the rest of the season at guillotineleagues.com. I'm a company man. If you did that, Brock Bowers is a first-round pick. I would argue that if you were drafting it for the rest of the season.
You would draft him like how people used to draft Travis Kelce a couple years ago.
That's my argument, yes.
Yeah, it's just he's just too good, too much volume at this point. Doesn't matter who the quarterback is. Any quarterback could throw it 3 yards past the line.
And again, the pro Kelce argument when he was going as a first rounder was it's not only that he's so good, he's so much better than everyone else at the position, and that's what Brock Bowers is doing this year too. It's not that he's elite, because he is elite, but he's significantly better than every other tight end in fantasy football right now.
And they ain't got nobody else.
No, dude.
Our tight end
Cut
edition.
To Jacoby Myers being like, wow, Lawrence, what's with the shrapnel?
Our tight end edition of Who's Eatin Good continues and closes out with Mark Andrews against the Bucs. Matthew, reason for optimism finally, or if you could sell, do you bail?
Reason for optimism because I now can sell. I thought it was a sunk cost. I thought, oh, God, I'm stuck with this guy. Now maybe I can get something for him. He's my tight end 16 this year. Back-to-back games with 55 receiving yards. Great. That's what I'm hanging my hat on when I'm trying to sell him, because the fact is that so far this year he still has a less than 11% target share. He has 3 different games with 2 or fewer targets. He has not had 1 game with more than 5 targets this entire year. On the season, a 60% route participation. If you watch that game against the Commanders, his biggest play was basically busted coverage. And whatever, he catches a touchdown, fine. But Isaiah Likely and Charlie Kolar are both involved. It's a 3-headed tight end by committee. Like, I have no confidence at all that Mark Andrews is quote-unquote back. So, yes, if I could get something solid for him,
definitely.
I would sell him. He's my tight end 16 this week.
Shout out to you if you can get something from Mark Andrews. And you said you have him at tight end 16 this week. Funny thing about that number, that's what he would have been if he didn't catch that touchdown pass. But if you look at that game, right, Likely still plays 68% of the snaps.
Thank you.
To Mark Ingram's 50%. That's not enough.
Andrews.
That's not Mark Andrews, sorry.
Yeah.
That's not what he did in the past. Then Charlie Kohler only playing 32% of the snaps, but that's still too much. Like you said, they're using all 3 tight ends. Lamar spreading the ball around. Unless you're Zay Flowers, he the man. But other than that, man, nah.
Kohler's the better blocker, and they want to be run heavy.
The key.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's the key. So he's going to be on the field.
We're taking one more break, one more back. Last call. We got our early line alert as we head into the weekend. DraftKings Sportsbook is the #1 place to bet touchdowns, and new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets instantly. Download the app and use promo code Barry when you sign up. DraftKings Sportsbook, the crown is yours. There it is. It's time for last call. Thank goodness. Here's the
I
early
couldn't let him
lines.
outdo me that time.
We're looking at the spreads and totals from a few games going into Week 7 on early line alert here. Lawrence, what do you like?
I like the Packers this week. I think they're coming along. Jordan Love's coming along. Texans missing some DBs back there. They haven't had a convincing win yet, so I like the Packers to take care of business.
I like that. Give me the under. The over-under line in Carolina at Washington is 51.5. Both teams are bottom 12 run defenses. I think this is a heavy run game on both sides of the ball. It just feels like the Panthers are competent enough to not get blown out here, but I also just, I just feel this is going to be a slower pace of play game. Give me an under on 51.5.
I'm looking at the Lions. The Lions are getting 2.5 points at Minnesota. I get it. Minnesota's been impressive this year, but I believe in the Lions right now. They're just absolutely rolling. The fact I'm getting 2.5 points in that game, I think that line's going to move before we get to the weekend.
Fur up.
That's
one
right.
fur.
Yep, one roar.
One paw. One paw. Fur up. There you go. All right, that music means it's closing time. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. For Lawrence Jackson and Connor Rogers, I'm Matthew Berry. We'll see you tomorrow on FF Happy Hour. Peace out. Hey, it's Matthew Berry from NBCSports.com and Rotoworld.com, and I want to thank you so much for watching whatever it is you just watched, or if nothing else, being too lazy to click out of the autoplay after this video started, after whatever it is you actually wanted to watch finished. But now that you're here, I'd like to take a moment here to ask you respectfully now, okay? I'm asking you respectfully to subscribe to the NFL on NBC YouTube channel. You'll get the latest Rotoworld fantasy news headlines, all sorts of great shows, including my own Fantasy Football Happy Hour. So go subscribe now. Again, I'm asking respectfully.